You're listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by. On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh. Glad to be here with you. I'm thankful that you're here with us. We got a great show planned for you today, this March 1st, 2024. Sudbury News Talk. We've been around for 2 years now, just about 2 years, give or take a day or two. So, yeah, we've been Sudbury Sports Talk since 2017, but Sudbury News Talk for the last 2 years. So we're grateful to be here with you. We got a great show planned today, and weather, news, local news, and sports, and your comments. We have, a little bit of a deep dive today. It looks like Sudbury's not on track to reach their net zero targets by 2050. So we're going to have to really ramp up the sacrifices and the positioning that we're going to have to take in order to reach those net zero targets. So we'll talk about that and maybe talk about some of the things that we've been doing as a world to try and achieve these net zero targets and go from there kind of thing. So that'll be a little bit of a deep dive today. So stick with us. It's going to be a great show. We're live on Facebook.com/Sudbury News, YouTube.com/Sudbury News, and make sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, mainly comment. We'll get your comments up on the screen and read as much as we can until we move on with the rest of the show. But anyways, great to have you with us. Stick around. It's going to be a great one, as usual. And Sudbury Weather brought to you by SudburyWeather.ca. It lands on our Sudbury.news website. Currently it's negative 10 degrees. Feels like minus 17. It's mostly cloudy and mainly cloudy today with a 40% chance of flurries this morning. Then clearing near noon, and the wind will be gusting about 40 up to 40 kilometers this morning. And the high will be about +3, wind chill minus 17 in the morning. But then tonight, I don't know what the wind chill is going to be in the afternoon. They rarely include that for some reason, Environment Canada. And then tonight, clear, the wind will be gusting to 40 kilometers as well. And low of -2. So it's going to get a lot milder this afternoon and into tonight. Saturday, mix of sun and cloud. And the wind chill will be near -8 in the morning. And as you can see, Saturday will be +4 tomorrow. The high, mix of sun and cloud, +6 and cloudy on Sunday. 30% chance of showers and a high of +9 on Monday. +4 on Tuesday. Chance of showers, 40%. 3 is your high, +3 on Wednesday. Mix of sun and cloud, 30% chance of flurries on Thursday. High of +3. So even as late as March the 7th, it'll be in the pluses. A look at your satellite here, just a little strip of clouds, just enough to go right over the top of the Great Lakes and keep the clouds a-coming over greater city of Sudbury. We'll talk about clouds a little bit later on with a little bit of a documentary called Dimming. And, it's a few of you have shared it on the Facebook page or shared it to me personally. I've watched it and I think it's just good as we're trying to get to net zero, right? So we got to do whatever we can to dim that sun and really slow down the climate change. So we'll have a look into what scientists around the world are doing to dim the sun, all part of geoengineering. And we'll talk a little bit about that and much more when we come back. A little bit of sports first when we come back after this. That's your Sudbury Weather, brought to you by SudburyWeather.ca. And your Sudbury Sports brought to you by SudburySports.ca. The Sudbury Five were in action last night. Unfortunately, they lost against the Kitchener-Waterloo Titans, and as a score of 100-81. So, unfortunately, hopefully they'll get the win when they visit London Lightning on Tuesday. That's your Sudbury Five. Now the Sudbury Wolves are in action tonight here in Sudbury as they will face off against the Sarnia Sting. Yeah, a little bit more information on that. Let me see. They are 4th in the West Division, 9th in the Western Conference, and they're continuing their fight for a playoff spot, so they're going to be out with the guns a-blazing. Tonight's game at the Sudbury Arena is sponsored by Real Canadian Superstore, and the Wolves will be wearing their special fan-designed jerseys, and they'll be auctioned off with 100% of the proceeds going to President's Choice Children's Charity. They'll be auctioned off on March the 6th. And then the Oshawa Generals are in town tomorrow, Game 2 in the Eastern Division. Sorry, they'll be in town tomorrow. They stand in the standings. They are 2nd in the East Division and 4th in the Eastern Conference. And they also solidified a playoff spot last week. And Saturday's game will be sponsored by Tim Hortons. Get your tickets at greatersudbury.ca/tickets. Get out and support your Sudbury Wolves at the arena. It's going to be a great time, as it usually is, especially weekend games. They fill up pretty fast. Make sure to get your tickets so you actually can get in. And go Wolves, go. We'll be back with news headlines, your comments, and much more right after this. That's your Sudbury Sports, brought to you by SudburySports.ca. Okay, so just seeing who might be joining us currently on the chat. Let's see here, just as we get everything up and running, as I'm finding everything on this new device here. And chat we will. Let's see here. And as we get Sudbury News up on the monitor as well, it takes a while to load, so I have to continue loading it several times before it comes up, and there you go. And sometimes even that takes a while, but there we are. Got a little bit of a gang on this morning. Judy's first to the Facebook party this morning. Good morning, Judy and Mary Ann. Hello from Barrie, liked and shared as usual. Thank you very much. And Belinda, good morning. Some things will break your heart, but fix your vision. Hey. Yeah, that's exactly true. I've had a broken heart once or twice in my life. Actually, I think once it's broken, does it ever really go back together? I think there's always a bit of a broken heart once it's broken. It stays there, and there is a reminder or a teacher to us. But the way we look at things, definitely, in time does heal all wounds, although there is still a little remnant there, for sure. Thanks for that positive statement in the morning. And Denise, good morning. Blessings from Espanola. Belinda, if these mayors in the municipalities go along with the net zero carbon deceptions, they will be held accountable. Okay, thanks, Belinda, for that. And we'll have more on that coming up. As it is in the news, Monique, good morning, Sudbury. Liette, good morning from Collingwood. Sunshine emoji, smiling. Vin, morning to you as well. Thanks for being with us, Marianne. Exactly. How do they sleep? At night, it's beyond me. The mayors, that is. And Brian, top of the morning, Sudbury campers. David, good morning. Thankful that you're with us. It's great to see you on. Haven't seen you for the last little bit, and I hope you're doing well these days. Miles, like the headline in Sudbury News, come on, latest Trudeau-China scandal. Yes, that is. I shared Pierre Poilievre yesterday in his news conference talking about the I guess we have our own lab leak in a different way, the Manitoba lab, and how Justin Trudeau covered it all up. And just before the election, he didn't want it to come out. He didn't seem to want to get to the bottom of it. And then it came out later that China interfered in the elections. China was the one meddling with our lab. And then later on, there was a pandemic right after that. Surprise, 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 right? Which undoubtedly now we know came from the lab in Wuhan. That was controversial at one time to say that, even though right off the bat we knew that's exactly what happened. Jon Stewart did a little funny shtick on late night with his old compañero Stephen Colbert, and basically just totally said what common sense comes from the lab in Wuhan. The lab is named after the virus itself, right? Like what the heck? So there you have it, and crazy stuff. So if you want to see that full press conference, I shared it on Sudbury News' Facebook page if you have a hard time finding it. Yeah, it's pretty scathing. And if we don't have an election in the next little bit, I'm not sure what. Prime Minister should be charged, actually, I would think, if this was a totally transparent, free, fully functioning country. Why aren't they monitoring the parking on the streets downtown? It has been free, no tickets since last year. Really? This is Alan, and good morning, Alan. Thanks for being with us. I was not aware of that, if that is true, by the way. Good in some ways if you want to park free. I know they have that digital hotspot parking thing that I've had to download on my phone as an app and then use that instead of using cash. I think you still could use cash, but I downloaded that app anyways. So I don't know. Free parking. Interesting. That's a question for some of our city councilors, I guess. And maybe they weren't aware of it either. Good morning from River Valley. Linda, thanks for being with us this morning. Great to have you on. Denise, I remember March 2019, there was a breach. And that's at the lab in Manitoba. I'm thinking we're speaking of. That's where the whole controversy is coming from that Pierre Poilievre had his press conference about yesterday. Miles says all the young people should demand an election to get rid of the Communist Coalition. That's an interesting term, Communist Coalition, because that's actually what it is. So that's interesting that you coined it like that, because I think from now on, that's what I'm going to be saying. Marianne, I remember when parking was free everywhere. Yes, and that is true. Monique, good morning, everyone. Exclamation point. Thanks for being with us. Cash is king. Denise, for sure. And Brian, welcome to Canadian politics where the rules are made up and the votes don't matter. Liette, good morning. And yes, how this government continues is beyond me. The latest Winnipeg lab scandal is criminal. Where are the arrests? Exactly. And then it came out the other day that the RCMP said in the House of Commons or whatever, wherever they were being questioned, that they didn't even investigate Prime Minister Trudeau on the SNC Lavalin scandal. I don't understand. I really don't. I thought that's what the RCMP were there to do. People got to be doing their jobs. And we can only do so much on our end. You get paid lots of money to do that particular job on behalf of your country, not on behalf of your prime minister, on behalf of the people of the country, right? So please, it would be much appreciated. So I think COVID was developed and released from Canada, not China. Interesting, Belinda. Trudeau left the borders wide open for a season. Then 2 Chinese scientists were whisked out of the country and there was a massive cover-up. That is very interesting. And I don't have anything or any way to refute that. And it could definitely be a possibility exactly where whoever is put in this appointed, not elected. Yeah, exactly. Into our political leadership positions in this country. As long as them halls are empty, they're going to do whatever they want. Our silence is consent. So silence is consent. We do know that. It is unfortunate. We need to speak up. We need to do things. We can't just sit back and think that people are doing it for us. Yep. So you also agree that it was created, transported it from Canada. Interesting. Interesting that we would have had that role in the whole pandemic if that is true, right? And can you imagine if we could actually get to the bottom of that? And then Trudeau is still in and doesn't get in any trouble about that? Then you'd really know things are, yeah. Good morning, Debbie. Thanks for being with us. And Evelyn as well on YouTube. Good morning. Thanks for being with us as well. News brought to you by Sudbury.news. That's where news is aggregated into one convenient location. As you can see, I have it in the top third there. And you can just scroll down and see all the news stories of the day. You can go by news, sports, weather. There's obits there as well. So the headline, the main headline on the top, Greater City of Sudbury not on track to reach net zero by 2050. So that's by Sudbury.com. The city's inaugural annual report on climate action was tabled this year, which will be used as a benchmark for future reports to help map a path forward hitting net zero emissions. Cool. We'll talk more about that in the just after a couple other news stories of the day from Sudbury.com as well. They have a couple stories they're covering. Good morning from Capriol, Shirley. And Alan says, I think it's called political immunity. Different set of rules for a different set of people, let's say, right? For those people. Those people, oh no, I hope we don't get canceled. Or I hope you don't get canceled by saying those people, Alan. Anyways, so Sudbury.com here, they're going to buy up and demolish 196 Van Horn for $500K. City of Greater Sudbury has been cleared to purchase 196 Van Horn Street as part of a broader project to buy a swath of area properties in the Sudbury's downtown. In Sudbury's downtown, the city's elected officials decided during a closed session meeting on Tuesday to purchase and demolish the building, which was ratified by a unanimous vote during the public city council meeting that followed. After the meeting, Lefebvre, who is Sudbury's mayor, told Sudbury.com that the building was being purchased for $500,000 and that the deal has been in the works for a quote-unquote number of years. There were some issues with the property's title that delayed matters, which Lefebvre said lawyers have recently resolved. The building currently houses the Sudbury Multicultural and Folk Arts Association, whose operations will shift to the cultural hub at Tom Davies Square, the library/art gallery/municipal services project planned to take shape at City Hall. That is from Sudbury.com. So as we buy up more buildings downtown, as they have plans for things that we're not 100% sure of what the plans are at this point, but it looks like they have something in mind if they're buying up all the buildings and demolishing them, correct? Survey shows rising opposition to childhood vaccinations. Are we surprised? So a new Angus Reid poll said, while most Canadians continue to believe it would be irresponsible not to vaccinate their children against numerous childhood diseases, there appears to be a growing opposition among some parents to the idea of such vaccinations. The new data from the nonprofit Angus Reid Institute finds 7 in 10 Canadians, or 71%, feeling the anti-vaccination movement is going to lead to unnecessary illness and suffering in the population. The survey company said there appears to be growing skepticism about vaccine efficacy among Canadians in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, especially among parents with children younger than 18. 1 in 6 parents of minors, or 17%, say they are really against vaccinating their children. A 4-fold increase from 2019, said the survey. There's also been a simultaneous 15-point decrease in the proportion of Canadians who support mandatory childhood vaccinations in schools, a policy in place in Ontario and New Brunswick. Opposition to this idea has risen correspondingly from 24% to closer to 2 in 5 or 38%. Yeah. There's a growing number of people that are a little leery of vaccinating their children. And that is that. Okay, so back to the city. The plan to hit net zero by 2050. The city's inaugural annual report on climate action was tabled this year, which will be used as a benchmark for future reports to help a map toward hitting net zero emissions. Adam, thanks for being with us this morning. Good morning. Isn't it nice to be under the thumb of a man who subscribes to Trudeau's deranged tax, spend and overreach perception? I can't wait for a massive 7% property tax increase come across the ledger again next this year. Taxes and death, the two things that are 100% going to happen in life, right? But there comes a point when you're taxed to the point where you can't even live. And I think we're at that point now. Children's vaccination is a slow death. That's Monique. Exactly. Okay. So thanks, guys, for your comments. Really appreciate it. I just want to see a little bit more about this Tyler Clark article from Sudbury.com on not reaching our net zero by 2050. People must be really worried. And because what are we going to do if we don't? I mean, what are the alternatives? The city of Greater Sudbury is not on track. According to a municipal report tabled by Strategic and Environmental Planning Manager Stephen Monet. This, his report notes, echoes various other governments around the globe who have fallen short on their environmental goals. The city must continue to integrate climate change action into projects, plans, and budgets, according to Monet's report. In some cases, a shift in technology may be needed to increase the rate of progress. However, more commitment to energy-efficient buildings, electric vehicles, and renewable energy production is still required. Monet, very forceful in his language. Paul Lefebvre, let's see. It's a challenge. This is following Tuesday's council meeting at which Monet's report was discussed. And City Climate Change Coordinator Jennifer Babin-Frensk delivered her presentation on the subject. The report in question included the city's inaugural Climate Action Report 2022. Babin-Frensk said the report took some time because it was their first crack at it. But another report covering 2023 is expected to be published by the end of the year. This will be followed by annual reports in subsequent years. During the 2022 election cycle, Lefebvre pledged support for the city's community energy and emissions plan, but criticized it for not including attainable short-term goals on the path toward 2025. The city's inaugural climate change annual report, which Lefebvre credits the previous incarnation of city council with requesting, is a solid step toward setting out stepping stones toward 2050. 2050. Even though it looks really far upon us, it's certainly going to be very quick upon our generation, he said. It's certainly going to be very quick upon our generation. Adding that measuring changes on an annual basis will help pinpoint which actions the city needs to take to affect the greatest change. Key challenges, according to Monet's report, will be upgrading and retrofitting the municipality's buildings and equipment so they're more environmentally friendly. 2019, the city's elected officials unanimously voted to declare a climate emergency in 2019, which led to the Community Energy and Emissions Plan, which includes various environmental goals underpinned by achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Last year, the city's adopted Community Climate Change Adaptation Plan, CCCAP, which operates in concert with the KEEP, CEEE, two P's, two E's, one P, the KEEP. Whereas KEEP centers on mitigative measures for City of Greater Sudbury to do their part to prevent climate change, the CCCAP centers on adaptation, managing the unavoidable, quote unquote. Oh yeah, there's so much here. Go and read it. There's lots. We got to reach. There's so many goals here. There's 18 goals, and the city was estimated to have emitted 1,492,526 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2021. They're projected to increase it by 200,000 tons equivalent, a drop in Monet's report attributed at least partially to the COVID-19 related restrictions. So there you go. What do you think about this whole net zero by 2050, right? Well, I know what scientists around the world, some of them anyways, and non-elected officials who feel they have the solution to how they will handle climate change, this emergency that the city has proclaimed and declared on us. There is a climate emergency in the greater city of Sudbury. And, they'll be happy to know that there are people around the world who already have this. They got your back and they're doing things about it. And it's called geoengineering, and it's called dimming the sun. So that way, it doesn't heat up too much for everybody. And a little look at that now, what it looks like. And get your popcorn, because if you haven't seen this yet, it's a little telling on what's already happening and been happening for many years over your head, and you either didn't know about it or you did know about it, but we'll know more about it from this documentary brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org.
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. We're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
Most are unfamiliar with a science term called global dimming. That term refers to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet due to light scattering particles that are building up in the atmosphere. And although many of these particles are from industrialized pollution, the larger majority are from the ongoing climate engineering solar radiation management operations. This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine by design is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus.
These are historical films of what can be done with a biplane, a small biplane that carries a very small payload. And that much can be done. How much more can a fully loaded military tanker, KC-10, KC-135, C-17 Globemaster, how much more material can they put in the air? About 500 times more with a single tanker.
In regard to the condensation trail narrative, many refer back to the trails left by World War II bombers as proof that we are only seeing condensation trails in our skies. But geoengineeringwatch.org found on military archives film footage, which we posted, of World War II B-17s at altitude turning off a sprayed dispersion. We know that climate engineering was deployed immediately after World War II, so testing was absolutely ongoing. Clearly, these bombers were used for beta testing. Film footage proves it.
Weather was a weapon used over Vietnam. Would you expect that to be then deleted from the availability? No. To continue to expand the scientific aspects of it, to have it available in your portfolio of weapons would be a natural process. Therefore, should you expect that it is available on demand to have the ability to modify weather? Absolutely, within this country and others.
Climate engineering is the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex. Climate engineering has been used to destabilize and topple nations all over the globe, facilitating military occupations by hostile countries like the US. We know that some of these countries are having their precipitation cut off because they have stated so on the floor of the UN, like the president of Iran stating emphatically that NATO weather modification programs were cutting off the precipitation to Iran, but US media never covered it.
We have an economic model operating globally, which is operating based on covert force. And I have very serious questions after watching the financial patterns as to whether that financial force or that force includes weather warfare.
People were coming to me, telling me about this. So because of that, I went to the government in Ottawa under Freedom of Information. There was a 40-page report, of which half the pages were completely blank, and the other half had a lot of blank outs. But there was sufficient information to tell me that, yeah, they're aware. They call it geoengineering.
One of the big problems is that when we find some new technology, we get all excited by it, by the potential benefits of that technology, and often implement it and use the technology before we have any idea of the negative effects.
Shouldn't it be considered that every breath we take is laden with highly toxic particles that are wreaking havoc in our own bodies? Particles that aren't being reported by any air quality testing systems. Any official air quality testing are looking for PM10 or PM2.5, 2.5 microns at best. The climate engineering nanoparticulates are exponentially smaller. They go virtually unreported.
These nanomaterials generate reactive oxygen species in biological materials, damage tissue, lead to advanced aging, cause cancer, causative agents of dementia. So, yeah, we might think that we're doing something positive for humanity to save our species, but we're also poisoning ourselves.
Eventually, with the team that we formed at geoengineeringwatch.org, we were able to acquire a NOAA flying lab. We were able to test at altitude to confirm the elements that were showing up at the surface.
Our intention was to do a point-to-point sampling mission. We could see these obvious patterns that were being laid out in the sky. We were really thankful for the opportunity to be able to get up to altitude. And on the return mission, we noticed that that cloud layer had descended. And we sampled below the cloud layer, we sampled through that confluent layer and above it.
We found exactly the same elements listed in climate engineering patents, the same elements we found on countless surface tests of precipitation from all over the globe. Governments all over the globe and the entire climate science community are telling the population urgently that climate engineering operations, solar radiation management operations need to be immediately deployed to try to mitigate the warming of our planet, to try to preserve what's left of its life support systems. And yet when the public, those that are awake, try to bring to the attention of academia and elected officials that we see climate engineering already being conducted in our skies all over the globe. It's already been deployed. Lab tests prove it. Film footage proves it. Documents prove it. And yet we have the continued denial from the climate science community and official agencies telling us that we're not really seeing what we're seeing in the skies. They tell us if climate engineering were deployed, it would look exactly like what we're seeing in our skies. But then again, they tell us that we're not really seeing what we are actually seeing. The paradox is the more the climate engineers spray the planet, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, and increase the overall warming of the planet, the more they feel they have to ramp these programs up to try to mitigate some of the damage that these programs have done in the first place. That is the true definition of insanity.
As a society, we are like a freight train heading for a broken bridge that is just a few years away from us. And I think people don't understand the exponential increase of toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race. These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems in the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening the overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
From a scientific perspective, and what we know about nanomaterials and their effect on human health and the environment, this is a serious problem. And it really does warrant further scientific investigation.
We need the answers to get to the bottom of this national security problem.
If populations around the globe find out what has been done to them by their governments without their knowledge or their consent, there will be a shockwave around the globe that cannot be contained by the criminal governments that have now taken control of our planet and civilizations all over the world.
Just bringing transparency will shift so many things that it will make it extremely difficult, because you cannot manage an entire planet with overt force, only with covert force. If we bring transparency to who it is in the covert force, it shifts everything.
Look at your own health and you know what is going on. And if you love your children, join us in fighting what we need to fight. This is a just fight, it's the right fight, it's the right cause.
And if the climate engineering operations, which are derailing Earth's life support systems, are not immediately exposed and halted, all other challenges for the human race become moot, because the planet will no longer support life. We are in completely uncharted territory. Virtually the entire web of life is being systematically contaminated and decimated by the ongoing climate engineering operations, on top of all other forms of human activity or anthropogenic activity that are wreaking havoc in the web of life. Climate engineering, mathematically, statistically speaking, is the single greatest and most immediate threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm.
Sounds like pure science fiction, but there is a growing underground movement of people who believe that our harsh drought is part of a government conspiracy.
Hear outlandish ideas like weather warfare and climate engineering, in other words, weather control, are accepted as basic fact.
Climate engineering is the greatest single assault on the environment ever launched by humanity, without question.
Dane Wigginton, lead researcher for Geoengineering Watch, is sounding the alarm. Climate engineering, they say, is to blame for the harshest recorded drought in California history. Dane is used to skeptics. He once was one himself.
Talk is cheap for those that haven't investigated. I didn't want to believe this either.
His background is in solar power, but he started investigating on his own about a decade ago after becoming suspicious something was partially blocking the sun's energy from reaching his solar home.
I grew up in Southern California, choking in a sea of smog. None of the adults around me seemed concerned about the conditions, but for me, life in the toxic murk was intolerable. I have always fully recognized the immense damage being inflicted on the planet by countless forms of human activity. I lectured on anthropogenic global warming. I dreamt of clean air and blue skies. I dreamt of living in untainted wilderness, off the grid. I dreamt of planting trees and watching them grow and thrive. I dreamt of coexisting with the wild inhabitants of the forest. I finally made it to the serene setting I had craved for so long, a remote forested mountaintop in Northern California. But the dream soon turned to a nightmare. When I began to lose significant amounts of my solar power uptake from my off-grid wilderness home, I knew something was radically wrong. We are officially told that the aircraft-emitted trails in our skies that linger, spread, and sometimes cover the entire horizon are just condensation. But the condensation trail narrative is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world. It is not possible for condensation to block at times 60, 70, even 80% of my solar power uptake. I began to research the issue of geoengineering, aka climate engineering, programs that governments around the globe and in climate science communities have told us are only proposals. Yet, there they were, in the skies above me. Even today, we are being told, falsely, by the climate science community that we have one final card to play to try to avert total climate collapse, total planetary meltdown, but this is in fact a lie. Climate engineering, weather modification patents go back more than 100 years, but all available data indicates that programs were first deployed at scale immediately after World War II and deployed over the polar regions in the attempt to increase the size of the polar ice packs and thus try to regulate Earth's temperatures.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Numerous government documents posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, some as much as 800 pages long, prove that global governments, even governments that the public perceives as being adversarial, are in fact colluding and cooperating on the climate engineering issue due to the cross-border ramifications. You can't climate engineer over your own country without affecting the entire planet. They are all working together on these issues, and other governments around the globe are either actively or passively cooperating.
Is the government experimenting with our weather? People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
There are 172 bills before the U.S. Senate right now calling for more weather modification programs.
A Weather Modification Act calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms.
My personal opinion is that we have to keep geoengineering on the table. We have to look at it very carefully because we might get desperate enough to want to use it.
There is a line of research on what's called geoengineering, which are various techniques that would delay the heating to buy us 20 or 30 years to get our act together.
The stated goal of some of the world's most recognized geoengineers, like Dr. David Keith and Dr. Ken Caldera, is to put 10 to 20 million tons of nanoparticulates into global skies annually. That's an inconceivable amount of material. This material is on top of industrialized pollution.
Right? This is about how we engineer the planet
It's about the fact, an uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact, that we have the technical ability to do this. They are all fast acting, they are cheap, and they are fundamentally imperfect. And the problems of how you control something where an individual country can have tremendous leverage over the whole planet's climate, and where there are winners and losers in ways that really could be unpredictable. And I mean, not to frighten you, but I think you can imagine scenarios that lead to war.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
There's all sorts of ways you could do this, but the standard idea has always been spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up.
The example many people cite was when the Mount Pinatubo volcano exploded. And all of this ash went into the air and had a cooling effect on the Earth.
And so people have long proposed since the mid-60s that you could artificially add dust to the stratosphere and cool the planet. Not that this would be a good solution for global warming, it would not. But it does show the way we're steadily developing the powers to manipulate the planet with comparative ease.
That sulfur in the lower atmosphere is masking some of the climate warming from CO2. So
is this the global dimming or something?
Yeah.
Other leading idea is basically to emulate what big volcanoes do, put material in the stratosphere to reflect sunlight.
So the problem is the following. If you add SO2 to the stratosphere, SO2 doesn't condense. So you might want to put alumina in. Alumina has a very high initial refraction. It's very small. It doesn't coagulate. And you could engineer particles that have particular properties. You can get them out of the stratosphere. You can concentrate particles near the poles.
Costs are so cheap that the richest people on the planet could perhaps afford to buy an ice age.
It's extraordinarily cheap. I knew it was cheap when I found that they were quoting me in tons. It's also true that particles, as they get bigger, fall out a lot faster. We sort of step back and think, okay, well, how would you actually make particles in the stratosphere? This is really engineering now. If it was aerosols in the stratosphere, it would likely be put there by airplanes. Start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets. The basic idea is that if you let a plume off in an aircraft by just changing some little details, you can actually get much smaller particle size distributions by doing this kind of spraying.
So there are all sorts of side effects. I'll get to them in a second. But if you put sulfuric acid in the stratosphere, for example, you could deplete stratospheric ozone.
Smaller size means more surface area, but more surface area means less ozone.
Is this stuff in the stratosphere going to be killing some number of people that are going to be sacrificed?
It's an obvious concern.
If it kills 1 million people and
It's
we're only
bad.
doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here.
So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say, you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as a direct result of that decision.
And so the only thing that we can do to cool the planet, or that society can do to cool the planet, is deploy these sorts of technologies.
And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids.
And it means there are going to be winners and losers, just like there are winners and losers for CO2, but they're different winners and losers. So this makes the problem, if anything, harder to solve. You've introduced another dimension of complexity into the managing the planet's climate problem.
What we're watching financially is a great deal of public policy being promoted on the theory that we have climate change. And yet in that discussion, we never talk about, well, what's all this spraying and how is that involved? Engineering the weather gives you the ability to overcome or prevent droughts. It gives you the ability to inflict them if you don't go along. And the brilliance of inflicting a drought is there's no popular support against you. So this kind of invisible warfare, if it can be done, is very effective, it would seem to me, both positive and negative. Well, imagine if you can predict the weather over long periods of time, how much money you can make. You can trade it. How do you manage money in that world?
Many people message me confused and bewildered as to how it is possible that such colossal programs can occur in skies above our heads, programs of climate engineering and solar radiation management that are literally decimating Earth's life support systems. And these programs are not being acknowledged by any official source, not being acknowledged by the climate science community that has indeed betrayed the human race and the entire web of life by their denial of the ongoing climate engineering elephant in our skies. And the people that message me are perplexed at how such atrocities can be ongoing for so many decades. And we have still official denial, and we have populations that are all too willing to accept that denial. I began to test for some of the primary elements named in climate engineering solar radiation management patents, starting with aluminum, barium, and strontium. My test came back from the state certified lab. To my dismay, these elements indeed were present in significant amounts, and subsequent tests showed higher and higher and higher amounts, continuing to escalate until one test was as high as 3,450 parts per billion of aluminum. This is highly toxic rain. I knew my life would never be the same because I can't look the other way. It's completely intolerable for me to live under toxic skies. And what about the trees? What about the bats, the bears, the birds, the bees? They have no voice except for us. I began to try to bring this issue to light from that moment on. Initially, few would listen, few would look at the data. But as time went on, and as more and more people woke up along the way and realized the significance of attempting to play God with the weather and engineer Earth's life support systems, more individuals from different arenas joined the effort to try to sound the alarm.
I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex. And they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs.
I sacrificed 4 years of my life defending the people of my country just to come home and find there are greater threats here domestically.
There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal.
Now, the aluminum content of rain should be 0.
And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found, but aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum.
Because you can spread so many small little particles through the environment, it dramatically increases the surface area that's in that environment because there's so many of them. When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
Solar radiation management, SRM, to block the sun. That's the stated purpose. The consequences don't seem to be considered with these programs, but that is the stated purpose on almost all UN and global governance documents for these programs.
And in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
United States code says you cannot experiment on the American public, and if you do, you got to report it to Congress within 30 days. Where's the proof it did that?
But it is also to get the media to start reporting on this.
So all of us have a consequence that we may not be aware of. And it is important for all of us to join together and to put a stop to these programs and to hold public discussions on them for as much as possible. And I want all of you to know that it's important that we realize that this is not normal and natural, that these are programs, experimental programs that are being conducted at this time, and we all have to stand up and say no.
This tank can be used for disseminating all types of agents. Anti-crop spray from aircraft using the Aero X2A has proved very effective in field trials. For larger planes, the Air Force has perfected spray equipment. This B-17 has several spraying nozzles and carries the tank in the bomb bay.
I'm Charles Jones, Brigadier General, U.S. Air Force retired. In the years 1953 through 1962, I was stationed in Germany. Then we moved to England in 1959 while assigned to the 42nd Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron with dual missions of electronic countermeasures and weather reconnaissance. We also had the responsibility of reporting jet engine contrails throughout our area of responsibility in Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Eastern Atlantic. We were responsible for pinpointing the exact altitudes of all jet engine contrails noted within the flying area of responsibility in both the weather and ECM aircraft missions. We became experts on jet engine aircraft contrails and all of their characteristics. Much different from the white aircraft spray trails that consists of scientifically verifiable strain of aluminum particles and other toxic heavy metals, polymers, and chemical components. These are the long white spray trails that linger and slowly expand into light cloud cover that soon cover entire areas with an overcast, very light cloud cover. We're never going to get to the bottom of climate change until everything is laid on the table about geoengineering and the disasters that it can and is causing.
My name is Richard Rolig. I served a career of 34 years in the United States Air Force. I was able to achieve the rank of Major General. I was in the acquisition business, developing new weapon systems, and did lead one major top secret program for 3 years. During the 10 years I worked at Raytheon, the exposure to various programs was limited to what they wanted you to work on. So even though I still had the top secret clearance and certain programs I got exposed to, that was not one of them. That was compartmentalized, as it should be, and unless you had a direct impact or you were personally involved in it, you would not have received that particular clearance. It goes back to around October of 17. I'm residing near an Air Force base here in Tucson, Arizona, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Aircraft exiting, doing their flight training, etc. And having lived around Air Force my whole life, my father even being a pilot, it became obvious to me that the contrails that were coming out of some of the aircraft in the local area were not normal looking. They took on a different texture, they spread differently, and so as a result, I started talking to a couple ex-pilots that are part of the organizations, asked them to look at it. My wife is a pilot. I had brought her out of the house. We looked at the contrails, and it was obvious that they were not normal. So as a result, we started doing a little research.
We called it the elephant in the sky. I mean, everybody on the planet is looking up and seeing this kind of spraying going on. I became involved in weather modification analysis due to my background as a weather observer in the United States Air Force.
And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And that's a half an hour of about an hour and 56-minute documentary that just doesn't stop. It just continues, like expert after expert after expert after experienced person after experienced person talking about what's going on, and just basically the writing on the wall, all the patents, how they do it, when they started it, what they're putting in it, why they're doing it. It's all there. That's investigative journalism 101. That would have been a W5 featured whatever back in the 1970s, let's say, or 80s. That would have been right on mainstream TV as a story. But these days, because things aren't as transparent, they aren't. So they're always called contrails. I know a lot of people I talk to, you're like, chemtrails, they go, you mean contrails? It's like, no, they're two totally different things. And I hope that particular part of that documentary, anyways, I know that Brian shared the link to the full documentary if anyone wants to see that. And it's just someone, Jungle Jim, shared something yesterday from me from space.com saying, here, maybe you can educate yourself on this. And space.com obviously is just saying they're all contrails. Like there's nothing to it, nothing to see here. And so I hope, Jungle Jim, I hope you're able to get a chance just to take a little peek at some of those things. And if you're interested in what's really going on and not what you're being told by space.com, you can then, if you're interested and you really want to know and you really want to know what's going on, but like Jack Nicholson said in A Few Good Men, maybe you can't handle the truth, right? The truth is the truth. What are you going to do with it, though? That's the thing. Once you hear the truth and you know it, what are you going to do now? right? So sometimes it's too much to break your brain in apart when you know true things, because sometimes true things can be scary. But don't worry about it. Your brain, like Humpty Dumpty, well, I guess maybe not like Humpty Dumpty, but your brain can go back together again. And knowing truth doesn't necessarily mean you're in a hopeless situation. There is hope after truth. Anyway, so thanks for being with us today, everyone. I hope everyone has a great Friday and a great weekend. And we will be back, God willing, same time, same place, same platforms, and maybe even on CKLU again if the internet can get back up and running after their cyber attack. So have a great weekend. It should be half decent. Some sun, some warm, and enjoy it. We'll be back, and we'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Ciao.
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.